How Evil Works by David Kupelian. This is like the sequel to, a great book that he came out with. What was the name of this book that he came out with before? Not Culture of Corruption. I'll think of it in just a moment. Oh, How Evil Works. And I'll tell you, that's not the name of the book that he came out with. What was the name of his first book? Was it The Snapping of the American Mind? This is 2010. I just can't remember right now. You'd think I could. I tell you what I'm going to do is I let you read the back of this. I'm going to look it up. But anyhow, How Evil Works is, best-selling author of The Marketing of Evil. It's right here on the front cover. How could I forget? Anyhow, he's also like an associate editor of WorldNet Daily, and I know the editor, Joseph Farah, has had like a severe stroke. I don't know if he's still alive even or what. So, and I think Kupelian's even had like heart surgery, and so I'm not sure if they're still, if Farah's even still in it. But WorldNet Daily was one of the leading conservative newspapers on the internet. It was one of the first ones, I think, even in the late 90s. It was a real big player. I don't know if it still is. So how does terrorism, we'll just read you some of this stuff. How does terrorism really work? Why are New Age religions becoming so popular? Why do so many celebrities have it all? Talent, fame, good looks, wealth, adoration end up self-destructing? Why are big lies more believable than little lies? Why are boys doing worse in school than girls? Why do we treat mental, emotional, and spiritual problems like anger and depression with drugs? And then it says David Kupelian is award-winning journalist and managing editor of the online news giant WorldNetDaily.com, as well as the monthly news magazine Whistleblower. His best-selling book, The Marketing of Evil, is currently in its 10th printing. So I'll just show you Kupelian. What I was going to say about Kupelian and The Marketing of Evil is, I guess working in Christian bookselling for so many years, I kind of knew a lot of it. And so it wasn't that big of a revelation to me. Not saying it was not a phenomenal book. It was just like, to me it was kind of old news. But I have been stunned, first of all, on the shelf life. I'll let you look at the back of this again too, some stuff there, of The Marketing of Evil and how it affected people. It affected churches in a positive way about holiness and what's happening in American culture. And, really, America is just a fascinating place if you study the history of it. I get this American Minute. It's not by David Barton, who I like a lot of David Barton stuff, Wall Builders, but American Minute is a guy out of Florida, Bill Federer, and he's got really good stuff as well. So let's see here. Threshold editions, New York, London, Toronto, Sydney. So, that's pretty big stuff when you have that, you're getting printed in Sydney, Australia, and all this. First Threshold editions, hardcover edition, February of 2010. So this looks like a first edition, all Bible quotations, unless otherwise noted, from the King James Version of the Bible. Cover design, which the cover designs on all these are great. Linda Daly, manufactured in the U.S., dedicated to his dad. So here is what it's going to have in it. Here's the table of contents. So Kupelian, he's going to be a very accurate historian, a cultural commentator. Of course, he's coming from a conservative Christian viewpoint. And I say Christian, I really don't know his ethos. I don't know if he's, into Judaism or what. Somebody was telling me that he was somebody in the 80s, was a follower of somebody that wasn't, I don't think, overtly Christian, and that was who he felt. But anyhow, it does seem to match up closely with a biblical worldview, at least a literalist Christian worldview. Let you take a look too at how the book is set up without the book cover. And that's just a traditional Morrow Publishing, major publishers type book cover, kind of even an old school type book cover. And it's a type book you can take with you. I'm sure it's in paperback editions now. And you can get these things cheap on like eBay, thrift books, maybe $3.99 and free shipping, Amazon, for not a lot of money. So here is the index. Just let you look. You kind of can get a feel sometimes for a subject matter. I would say this is in the line of like your Stormer books, None Dare Call It Treason, and your Gary Allen, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, and those kind of books in a way. Now, he's not so much into like your Rockefellers and Trilateral Commissions and Zbigniew Brzezinski's and all of this, but it would be more cultural, more Hollywood, which there's some fascinating things about Hollywood that studying and the music industry, Laurel Canyon. So, the mysterious power of hate, where on earth is God, turning the tables on evil in America, the war on fathers, false gods, rejecting God. You can kind of go through the Romans 1 paradigm, doctors, drugs, and demons, the secret curse of celebrity. One of the revelations I've had, just being on YouTube, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Instagram. I just really felt led of the Lord to get on YouTube. My mentor, Brother Paul Mooney, probably closest thing I've got to a pastor now. My pastor's died. He really encouraged that in class. He was telling students, you can change the world from your dorm room, just getting on YouTube and stuff like that. Now he realizes that you need to get out in the field and all that as well. So I was really convicted. So I thank the Lord God raised up some people at church to really help us. I'm not technologically proficient very much at all. The Lord did, when I was in high school, learn to type. And but one of the things is demon-possessed people can tweet. And demon-possessed people can now like type YouTube comments or even make YouTube videos. So that's a dynamic we've never had in this world before, to my knowledge. Like William Penn's advice to his children. I'm loving that. William Penn, oneness, state named after a oneness guy, Pennsylvania. Just turn to The Power of One. Let's just read this. You'll find this interesting. I think this is on page 251. Let's do the total page count, by the way. I always like to do that. I forget sometimes in some of these book reviews. So 289. And so another problem, what happens when you've done everything right, you've championed the truth effectively, you've brought tremendous public pressure to bear, but those in power still remain unmoved? Such was the dilemma of William Wilberforce in his decades-long campaign to end the slave trade in the late 18th century Britain. Wilberforce tirelessly and eloquently led the abolition movement in Parliament, yet failed to muster the requisite votes 11 different times over the course of 16 years. It seems that too many of his fellow parliamentarians had ties to the slave-dependent industries, and while agreeing with Wilberforce in principle, argued that ending slavery would decimate the British economy. Neither nationwide protests nor powerful testimonies before Parliament of the savagely inhumane treatment of Africans while at sea proved sufficient to persuade a majority to end slavery. Wilberforce's abolition campaign, popularly supported throughout Britain, failed year after year in Parliament. Then one day, Wilberforce's brother-in-law, a sharp maritime lawyer named James Stephen, came up with a brilliant idea. Britain was at war with France. Realizing that many of the British slave ships were sailing under a neutral flag, most often American, to avoid being bothered during the war, Stephen hatched a scheme to have a patriotic anti-French bill introduced that no one in Parliament would dare oppose during wartime. The bill would prohibit British ships, even under a neutral flag, from transporting goods or slaves to non-British countries or colonies, including French colonies. So with Wilberforce and his small abolitionist cadre remaining tight-lipped as to their real intentions, the neutral flag law sailed through Parliament and ultimately brought about the exact secondary effect the abolitionists anticipated, namely ruining many of the English slavers by preventing their ships from sailing. Then a few years later, with the trade seriously weakened, the time fully ripe, Wilberforce once again brought the issue before Parliament, and this time they outlawed slavery in Great Britain outright. His radical change of tactics, thanks to some inspired outside-the-box thinking, succeeded where straight-across battlefield approach had repeatedly failed. So that's pretty fascinating. I mean, like, I didn't know that part of history. I knew Wilberforce was the leading cause of the abolition of slavery in Great Britain, but I didn't know the backstory. So that's fantastic. I do want to make an aside here. You know, I've got friends and family that are like radically leftist and near communist, heavily socialist and stuff. And that was one thing when I finally, it took me years to figure this out, that we need to speak a common language, because like this, so he's obviously very much against slavery. He would be very much to be, you know, pro-life, and this would be of people of all ethnicities, that he would want to be pro-life in all of this. And so he wouldn't be racist in any way, shape, or form. And so they would just constantly yell in my face about how all the racist Christians in America. And so I worked in Christian bookselling, and I knew this just wasn't the case. Now, there probably was some racist Christians, but the numbers were exceedingly small. Now, maybe back in the 50s and 60s, I don't know. I was born in 65. But I mean, you know, everybody I knew just loved everybody, and you know, had friends of all different ethnicities, and thought everybody, I mean, if you're a creationist, you believe we all came from Adam and Eve and Noah and his wife, and so it's impossible to be racist. We're made of one blood. But they're just constantly yelling like in my face how race. And so I was finally like, look, what you're yelling at me does not comport with the reality that I'm living. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you know, you had tens of millions of evangelical church children that had full-size Michael Jordan posters on the back of their door in their 90s. Well, I mean, that's not anything racist. So, I think maybe there's misunderstandings there. So getting back to the topic at hand, how evil works. Boy, this is raised lettering here. Great book. I just couldn't recommend it more highly. And you might find it interesting as well. Like neo-paganism growing quickly. Numbers roughly double every 18 months in the United States, Canada, and Central Europe. Denver Post, June 26, 2008. I don't know if I showed you he has an amazing set of notes in bibliography in the back, and footnotes. National Public Radio, Wicca is believed to be one of the fastest growing religions among high school and college students. Sorcery sells and the young are buying. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, June 10th, 2007. So anyhow, just want to make you aware that this book even exists. And even though it's a little dated, the truth is not dated. Truth is transcultural and transchronological. It's for all people at all times. So God bless. I love you. Talk with you later in Jesus' name.